Hello everybody and welcome to a frankly miserable, miserly, wet and horrible winter's day here at the Great Bush Railway in Tinkers Park. Today is horrible out here, so we're going to go inside the exhibition hall here to review today's locomotive. This is Drusilla, and you may be thinking, Lawrie, that looks remarkably similar to the Motor Rail Simplex you did, about a year ago now. And that's correct, because you would be right, because it is remarkably similar. This is indeed a Motor Rail Simplex. It is a little different. For instance, this one has a bigger engine in it, and a cab, and lights, and a funky looking exhaust, and this kind of weird grey and yellow paint job. What's most weird is the height of the cab on this, compared with the bodywork, gives it a much kind of more squat appearance. It hasn't actually got any more squat, but it just looks, the height of this compared to the length of this, it's basically as high as it is long. It's a really weird looking locomotive, but it's got a kind of nice charm to it. I really like it, and also I like yellow. So it's got yellow on it, and I'm basically sold. It has many mod cons. For instance, it has sliding windows. And that brings us to the end of the mod cons that this locomotive has. One of the things I've always liked, and the most distinctive feature of a Simplex, is the radiator mounted, as most of you would consider, the wrong way at 90 degrees to what you'd expect, ensuring good airflow at all times through the little radiator. Now, she is a 40S, that's the class of what she is, and she's number 22236 of 1965, which makes her a lot younger than the one I drove last year. This is kind of like the evolution of that. It's the same basic thing with a couple of minor little things, like an air cleaner strapped to the side of it, because better than what the other one had, which honestly at this point I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure it didn't have that attached to it. And she went into service at the Severn Trent Water Authority's water treatment works at Minworth near Birmingham, and you have no idea how many takes it took me to get that sentence out correctly. And that's what she did. She moved around on the internal network they had there. I'm not entirely sure why a water treatment works needed a locomotive. I have no idea what goes on there for this to move around, but it did. And then it all gets a little bit hazy. We don't know why, and we don't know how, but in 1983, she was found working across the road at the Coal Hill sewage treatment plant. We have no idea when she was sold, why she was sold, or any of that. We just know that 1983, she was moved and was working there. That bit of history is lost to time. And that's where it spent the next part of its industrial life, which only really lasted for 3 years, until 1986, where she was moved to the Old Kiln Railway, where you would think, fantastic, the locomotive is safe, it's in preservation. Not quite. She was in full working condition when she arrived at the Old Kiln Light Railway and was pushed into service. She was used as one of their backup locomotives working the passenger trains. And that's basically what it did all the way through to 1992, where it got sold. The Old Kiln Railway realised they didn't really need it, they had other things, and so it was sold and went to Drusilla Zoo, as they had a 2-foot gauge railway running through the park for, well, kids to go and have a ride around the zoo on. It's a pleasure railway. This was the backup locomotive. They had a steam outline locomotive that was the colour and shape of a certain famous engine. And this was the backup engine, which was occasionally used. And as time progressed, they found this was increasingly hard to start. And to the point that by the time they'd started it, normally whatever they needed for had already happened or was no longer a problem. And so it came to the stage where they did the only logical thing that you do with a locomotive that you're not quite happy with. And I know what you're thinking. This is modern day. This was 2007. So you find yourself a preservation society and you offer the locomotive to them and say, do you want to look after this piece of heritage? That's not what happened. They scrapped it. In 2007, they sent a lovely little piece of history like this to the scrapyard to be cut up. Now, obviously, the locomotive is still here. I'm sat on it. So the scrapyard didn't cut it up. In fact, the chaps there saw merit in this. They realised what it was, a little locomotive that didn't really look too bad. And they figured that somebody would probably want to save it. So it was put into a position where it could be seen by the road. And 2 years later, one of the members here was driving past and went, "There's a locomotive in that scrapyard." So they called in and inquired, and for £500 of your pounds, they bought it. And it came back here to the Great Bush Railway. And on arrival, it was named Drusilla, after where it used to be, which is the name it still carries. Of course, this was a locomotive from a scrapyard, so it wasn't going to run straight away. And it took 2 years before it had been significantly rebuilt and restored, and in 2011 it fired up again. And since then, well, it's been a regular performer here at the railway. It has had some reluctance to start in the past, but I hear it's had some more work on it recently, and now it is in fine fettle. So apart from having the head rebuilt, the bodywork smartened up and repaired, and a new coat of paint, it's had the electrics rewired, which means that the lights, which we think are original on the roof, they work. And much unlike the other Simplex that I drove that had a hand start, this has been fitted with an electric starter, which makes life so much easier. So today, guys, you won't see me struggling with a handle, which is glorious. Disappointing for you, but glorious for me. This little lump weighs about 3 tons. And that's because it doesn't have the extra weights that are bolted onto various places on the outside like the other Simplex I drove. So it's a lighter version. And frankly, for what we do here at the Great Bush, it doesn't need the extra weights. We don't really do anything that really means it needs any extra traction. Coming around to the back, we're met by this huge yellow face, kind of the warning part of it. You can't miss it if it's coming towards you. And we see the rear light above us up here, and then down here there are a couple of holes where originally there would have been sanders fitted, and the gap in the bodywork here and here are for where the sanders would have been operated from. It doesn't have them anymore, although on a day like today where it's horrible, I feel like I might actually need them, but that's beside the point. And here we have the Simplex buffer / coupler. So this big piece of cast metal here with Simplex written across it, which I love, and a pin that drops through the middle. So you put your coupling hook or bar or chain through that, and then put the pin through, lock it in. There are 3 different steps, so it can accept bars of couplings of different heights. And then here we have a bumper. This is a big piece of cast metal, so if you were to smash into something hard with it, you can potentially crack it. So this is Simplex's way of a safety device to help protect that. That's quite cool, and hopefully we won't need that today. I mentioned that Drusilla had some problem getting this thing to start, so they added this. Here we have a little tap that you open by doing this, and Drusilla would shoot Easy Start into that, a copious amount into it, and that's how they would get the thing to fire up. It spent a lot of time being started by Easy Start, which is it's a good way to get something started occasionally. It's not a good fix, but that's how they're done. That's one of the few things on this that's really been changed during its life, and it's been kept on as it's part of its kind of heritage and part of its story. But the good news is it's not needed anymore. The other thing that's quite obviously not original is the exhaust, which is a totally different colour and it's sized a bit higher than the locomotive. Now you might be thinking this is good practice to have the exhaust way above where you are, and this is true, it is good, but it's not how it was originally. When it was at the old kiln, they had a strange exhaust on it which kind of came up here, then came across here, then kind of worked its way up here and went across the back of the cab. This was very pretty and everything, but it did stop you from opening the bonnet. So you had to unbolt the exhaust, remove it, and then you could open the bonnet to get to the engine. And frankly, that's not that useful. The other thing it has that you might be able to see down here is there is a hand start. So if the starter motor dies, you can put a handle into there, crank it over. Now, even if I wanted to do this, which I don't, the Great Bush Railway has no idea where the handle is for this. It didn't come with a locomotive, so we can't do it. Having a cab, you would generally think is a good idea. It protects you from the elements, it produces some kind of warmth and protection from, well, anything else. And it makes you feel more snug. It also means that if it's raining, your seat doesn't get wet before you get onto it. This cab is rather small. It is cramped by the best possible and most optimistic look at things. Getting into it will provide a challenge because you see the controls all kind of come across. Can you see in there? It's a bit dark in there, so we might have to open the door on the far side to let some more light in. Just like that. Now, this is the bit where you look at me and you think, that is a graceful human being who is able to do things very well. Possibly he has a touch of ballerina in him before the way that he moves is so graceful. This is a moment that I will destroy all of these illusions, because there is no good way to get into Drusilla. It is. It's terrible. This is, without doubt, the worst thing about the engine. It's trying to clamber in. Because it's... Oh! You have to have the window open, you see, so you can put your head out of the cab like that, and then you can kind of twist round and fit yourself in. Now that I'm in position, it is very comfortable, very nice. I now, though, do not want to have to get out of the locomotive because it's, well, as graceful getting out. However, being in this position, everything is very easily accessible. So, looking through, we have the throttle here, handbrake here, which is currently on, we push it forward to release. Then we have a clutch, which is this foot pedal here. And then we have the reverser here, reverse being down there, forward this way, and then our 2-speed gearbox here. That being first, which is slow, and then over this way being second, which is quite a lot faster actually. Moving round alongside me here, we have a couple of gauges, which from my height, I can't see. My normal driving position here, I can't see them. I have to kind of come all the way back over here to see my oil pressure and the battery charge indicator. We have a little toggle switch here for the lights, go on forward and reverse, and of course, an amazing klaxon, which makes me very happy. That's basically it. There is one further control here. We push this all the way back here and push the centre part of that in with the throttle wide open, and it goes click. It's now in overfuel, which is basically cold start. Keep throwing diesel in until it starts. And then we push it the other way, and that's the fuel cut off, and that will shut the engine down. The cab has also got some nice other little touches. For instance, there's a nice big plaque there, which has all the recommended oils that this should have. And that's a nice bit of heritage for the vehicle to keep. We also have weird things like here, we have a pin that locks the handbrake in position. So you have to lift this up and push it over this little latch to release the handbrake. And you can see, now it's released, you can see the notches here that you can lock the handbrake down in. Finally, the seat tips forward to reveal a toolbox. And in there, there is absolutely nothing apart from a sock, which apparently has been in there for years. But that's why we have the door here, so you can access the toolbox, because otherwise, well, you couldn't access the toolbox. So that is the sheer reason for this door, is to get into the toolbox here, which has nothing. It has other nice little touches in here, like just down here we've got a Simplex maker's plate, which is a delightful little touch, which gives it the works number, and just like things that say Simplex on them and let you know who made it. So with the cab looked at, let's go prep it. First of all, axle boxes. We don't need to touch them, they're sealed, they're done occasionally before we run by a fitter. No problem there, he has to take those bolts off on the outside and fill it up with a special kind of oil. But that's not our problem today, that's awesome. So we lift this flap here, which reveals the side of the engine. So we check the tension of the belts here, and then reaching somewhere about down in here, we have the dipstick for the engine. And that is covered in oil, and so we know there's plenty of oil on that. And I know the locomotive was checked by the team here at the Great Bush Railway before I touched it, so we know it's full of oil. And then obviously we're looking for any major leaks, anything that looks abnormal, that's all fine. We come around here and look at the battery, which is very firmly secured in place by gravity alone. There should be a battery box for this, but it doesn't have one. But it's a lovely new battery, and hopefully won't go anywhere. We also have the air filter here, which if we really wanted to, we could pop off on these clips here and have an inspection, see how much gunk there is and if the oil's clean. We don't actually have to do that, so we're not going to. That's been done for us. Walking around to this side, we have the radiator here. So we pop the cap off, like so, and have a gander in there to say, is the water? And that's full of water, so that's good. Replace the lid and continue walking around, which is on a convenient chain, so you don't lose the lid. Coming around here to this side, we have the fuel tank, so we pop off the fuel tank and have a little gander in there to see if there's diesel. There's diesel in there, so that's a good start. And then we open up the panel this side. Now, in here and down here, you have some more areas that need greasing up with the grease gun, which are here, here, and there, and somewhere, there. And then there is a belt right back there to check. And again, just making sure there's nothing awry in there. We shut that down. And here we have the gearbox dipstick and filler. And again, that is a job that's done by the fitters and not us. So we don't need to touch that. I know they've done it. And standing back up, there is one last thing to check, which is to get our arm around the back here to check the tension of the belt here. Because this one, unlike the one I drove before, has got a working fan. Because working up the gradient here will make an engine hot. The last thing is, the panel here has been mysteriously removed to allow us to access the chains, and we would grease up the chains. And simply to do this, all we do is we get some grease, put it in your hands, and wipe it on the chains. Thankfully, they've already done that for me, so I can keep my hands somewhat grease-free. With all that done, it's time to start it, to climb inside and turn the key. But because it's such a paraphernalia to climb in there, I'm going to do it from the outside. So first we check, make sure it's not in gear. Now, the starter on this is one of the weirdest starters I have ever come across. Normally, when you turn over a starter on something like this, it spins the engine over relatively quickly and gives a kind of a sense that it's trying to start. This one turns over at the speed that makes you think the battery's flat. And just at the moment you think this is never going to start, it fires up into life. So I'm going to reach into here, open the throttle and reach across to push the extra fuel in. And now with that done, we turn the key and see what happens. So with that running, let's brave the elements and take it for a spin. Right, so let's see how this is to drive. Into forward gear, we're going to select first gear to start off with, handbrake off, and away we go. Slowly off the clutch. Whoop. Oh, the exhaust sounds lovely. The first thing to notice from this, that although the cab on this horrible day is protecting me from the weather, it does rather amplify the noise in here. There's a lot of reverberation. I can hear all the banging, the crashing from everywhere else, just in here. It is a loud cab. The exhaust, however, sounds amazing. There's a gap down by my feet where I can see the wheels going round, so that's giving me an idea of, well, make sure I can see that we're slipping or not. So that's quite nice. The seat itself is padded and that's very comfortable. I'm sat here going, yeah, this is nice, as the locomotive has effectively no springing at all. Visibility, well, out the front is pretty good. I've got a very nice wide window here so I can see most things. Anything behind me though is totally lost. Not having a door on the front gives me a lot of visibility that way. And I can see well over the back of my train, but it is somewhat restricted by the bodywork behind me. And then right behind me I can see absolutely nothing at all. On the other hand, today that means there is a little bit of warmth held in here and kept in here, which is, yeah, really quite super. This thing with its little engine gives a real sense of power, opening up that throttle. Oh yeah, that feels quite agricultural. the brakes now. Oh yeah, they're quite good. They stopped us, yeah, just like that. And then my favourite thing is the klaxon on it, which is superb. It's really nice. Like, once you've got past the initial problem of getting into it, because let's be honest, getting into this is a struggle. This is a very narrow cab with too many controls in the way. It's really, really nice. It's lovely once you're in. The problem is just getting in. And now I'm in, I really don't want the hassle and the faff of trying to climb out of it. Because that will be a challenge again. Downhill gradient now, so I'm going to try and find the brakes again and see what happens. All things considered, it's wet, downhill, they work very well. The engine is also, as it's a diesel, it's helping to self-regulate. We don't run away down this hill at all. I didn't really need to use the brake there, I just get the revs low, which is really a very reassuring engine. It gives you a good sense of purpose. It plods along, but yet there's a very strong sense of it's designed to go slow and steady. That's exactly what it does. And it is quite loud, but it's on the border of being loud enough for you to be going, oh. Trundling along here, this is acceptable. Personally, I wouldn't want to be in this every single day because I think you would go deaf. But for a day's use, it's loud, but it's not too loud if you get my drift. And it does feel somewhat more civilised having the cab. You just feel it's a definite stave up. Having a Simplex with no cab is, well, it's a bit grim. Having this one with the cab on it, it just makes you feel a bit better about everything. I'm happy with that. It feels good. The throttle itself, well, if I open the throttle now, there's a good second while the engine thinks about it and starts getting going before it then takes up the slack in the chain and we start to lurch forward and start moving again. But all things considered, that's fine. I'll take that. It's so nice to drive an engine like this with an appropriate train again behind it. Having the skips behind just looks superb and makes me feel quite industrial. So we're going to have a go now at changing gear and see what that does. See if we got any better at this. All the way up. That was quite good. It banged, but that was quite good. So now we're in second gear. This has got quite the turn of speed on it. It really does shift. Like, quite amazingly so. Oh, it's quite a machine. The extra power by this bigger engine just gives it a little bit more oomph. It really does have quite the character. It's a really... She kind of gives the impression of how much she could shift. Of course, the problem with shifting stuff comes down to how much traction we can put down, how much actual grip we have. As we come back onto the slope here, I'm reminded of the fact that I can see down to my wheels, so I can watch here to make sure that as I use the brake, we don't lock up at all, which is a really, really useful thing to be able to do. It means that I can feel nice and under control. It also means if we're trying to start away with a heavy train in, conditions like today, wet and miserly, we can check down and see how the wheels are doing to make sure they're not spinning, because obviously I'm sat inside the cab, I can't see. I can only hear the engine revs. And the clutch itself on a pedal is a very nice way, it's a very controllable way to put that power down. It means that you can get a lot of control out of this, and you can just butter up to things beautifully gently. I would definitely have one like this. I would be very happy with a little Simplex like this. That would do me well. You don't want to crew it day after day, but as industrials go, this is pretty good. But certainly one of the most comfortable Motor Rail Simplexes that I've ever been in. And I do like Simplexes, they're lovely engines, and also having the controls to be the same. You know how to drive one, you can drive any of them. It's nice just to be able to hop into an engine and know where everything is and just go from it like that. It's a super little Loco. Super engine. Although it's got a similar sensation to my Ruston 48 as we're driving. It feels very short. The added height of the cab kind of plays with the proportions a little and makes you feel a bit like, looks a bit weird, it looks squashed, it almost looks a bit like it's been squashed. Well, I do like it though, I really do like it. So guys, that's the end of this look at Drusilla, which is a very weird, but it's a lovely little machine. Something that it just looks a bit strange, especially when you see it going past. But I really like it, and I know everybody down here at the Great Bush Railway really likes it too. So please guys, if you've enjoyed it, like, share this video with your train and your non-train friends, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Let us know, do you like this Loco? Do you know anything like it? Or do you have a locomotive that you'd like to appear on the channel? If so, the link to our website with the contact us form is in the video description. And if you like what you see here at Tinkers Park and you want to know more, the link to their website is in the description. And if you really want to get involved, like you really like what you've seen, and you want to learn how to drive this or any of the other engines appears in Lawrie Goes Loco, then the email is also in the video description so you can get involved, well, and get in contact and say, hey, I'd like to be part of it. The railway would love to have more volunteers and they'd love for you to get involved. So guys, really hope you've enjoyed it. I've loved it. It's a fantastic little piece of equipment. Just, it's full of character and the odd proportions of it just make it, well, strange. So if you like this and you want to see another video we've done here at Tinkers Park, click up here for Titch, the battery electric vehicle. Or if you want something on the standard gauge, how about clicking down here for the Ruston 88 that I did. See you later guys. Thanks a lot.